You know, the film censorship people here in Britain have had a rather weird history. I mean, we've talked a little bit about how they've lobbied the government in the past, but we've not really talked about the stuff they were doing before, during and after that point. As late as the 1980s and 90s, they were still cutting nunchucks out of films. And surprisingly, a lot of their crazy ideas were down to just one guy, the Tsar of British censors, James Ferman. But was he as completely stupid and ridiculously evil as I always make out on this show? Yes! Ferman was born in America in 1935, and after joining the US Air Force, ended up staying in England permanently. At a sprightly 40 years old, he got the job that every kid dreams of, being the head of the British Board of Film Censors. And he came in at a time of great change. The 1970s. America had given up on its crazy Hays Code moralism, and now people could drink, dance and screw in their films. And do all three at the same time they probably did. Europe, as always so, was on another level. Whether it's Italian horrors, Swedish sex comedies or French art films about shitting yourself and dying, we'd beaten them to the punch. You know, with all the good things you want in life. Also in England we had quite an important movie-making renaissance of our own. Films like The Wicker Man, The Devils, Quadrophenia, Kess, Performance, and countless others changed how directors directed. But whilst filmmakers were trying these new things, the BBFC would rather they didn't. Now, while they did change a fair bit in the 70s, they didn't really want to budge too much. But to begin with at least, Ferman was going to be different. To begin with, here's a quick quote from former censor Geoffrey Wood all about Ferman. When James Ferman was appointed censor in 1975, he brought new standards of viewing and reporting to the board. But by the mid-1980s, it was stuck in an unfinished revolution. Backed by a newly appointed presidential troika, the director's word became law. Ferman could do what he liked. And what Ferman grew to like was to protect people from danger. That's right, people, the danger of films! He believed that violence and sex-heavy content was not suitable for the general public, because they will inevitably be desensitized to it, and therefore go out and copy what they've seen. He was a big pusher of legislation following the Video Nasties debate. So when the Video Recordings Act came in, all films had to be rated by his film board, and by 1985, store shelves only had rated videos. Naturally, almost every video nasty on that big list that I, in fairness, did try to show you, it's just the video effects didn't really go very well, was either summarily banned or heavily cut. We're talking cuts to sex, violence, language, you name it, and him and his film board did it. And to tons of films that really didn't deserve it, as you'll see in a minute. For example, Ferman hated The Exorcist. From 1986, you couldn't buy a copy of it because Ferman wouldn't let it get cleared for a home video release. I just want to clarify, not the board, but Ferman specifically.
So The Exorcist, the board had to have a look at it and had to decide on how to classify it for video release. It was seen several times by pretty much all the board's examiners. I think it's fair to say a majority of people felt it should be past 18 uncut, as had happened with the cinema release. However, there was a minority view, and our director James Ferman was part of that were concerned really that because the film had this aura of notoriety, it would tend to attract younger people, coupled with the fact that the protagonist is a 12-year-old girl, that this might make younger children more interested in The Exorcist than they might be in other adult-level films, and there was therefore a risk that the film might particularly appeal to children and they might seek it out. So ultimately the deadline came round in 1988 and the board decided to just put the film on ice.
Not give it a certificate.
We didn't reject it, but we didn't give it a certificate.
Yeah, but to the public, both end up with the same result. A technicality is not going to stop you from the reality that you censored art. And you want to know how long it took for The Exorcist to finally come out on video? February 1999. According to pro-lifers, and probably Ferman, let's be real, I was alive at a time where you couldn't buy The Exorcist. If you're older than me, you might remember these four things being named the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. There must have been a reason for that, right? We just don't know anything about Japan. No, mostly James Ferman. Ferman, and therefore the BBFC as well, hated nunchucks, both real ones and cartoon ones. Ferman was concerned that people would be inspired by their usage in martial arts films and then go out onto the streets and kill people with them. Because that's what will cause an uptick in violence. Not the rampant socio-economic problems of the 80s, not the miners' strikes, not the Troubles, but a bit of wood that you're more likely to hurt yourself with. Of course, if Ferman had cared to go to his local newsagents, he would have found tons of martial arts magazines with back pages full of nunchuck selling action. Almost as if they still existed, even if the films he cut pretended they didn't. There are many, many detailed frame-by-frame breakdowns of the edits the BBFC instilled on Enter the Dragon, or the Ninja Turtles films, and they're all an eye-opener for just how seriously, / stupidly, they took this whole banning parts of martial arts thing. But as I said, it wasn't just the Ninja Turtles. The Bruce Lee catalogue and practically any martial art film of the time got some serious pruning and trimming. And speaking of things affected by serious trimming after the 70s, what is bizarre and fascinating about James Ferman was his view of art. Infamously, he once said that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was fine for middle-class cineasts, but what would happen if you let a worker from Manchester see it? When it came to mainstream schlock, he censored a lot of dumb stuff. But art, with the one exception of blasphemy, was usually fine. Especially towards the end of his career, he really let art films push the envelope, for example The Idiots, which got away with full, unsimulated sex scenes. In brief, he was a massive, massive snob. Eventually, things came to an end. After nearly 25 years, he resigned in 1999. In a rather strange way, he'd actually tried to reverse some of the really crazy stuff that he'd started. It was almost as if he had a bit of an epiphany, typically as he was about to leave the job. And an actual era of change and demystifying occurred, so quickly that his terrible legacy on cinema was pretty much wiped out in a couple of years. The BBFC created and published guidelines for the first time with direct consultation from the public that it represents. And now we're pretty much censorship free. Well, within reason obviously, but it's not the hell that it used to be, and at the very least you can watch The Exorcist in the comfort of your own home. And it was that moment in filming when I realised I'd forgotten to buy a prop. Whoops.
So is flange an 18 or 15?
I don't know what flange means.